Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT. Home. Safe home.
Definition has to be the greatest winning streak that any of us have ever seen.
He's going to have wrist surgery this week. He is expected to miss 2 to 3 months.
The DNA of this offense totally changes.
How do you keep this from snowballing?
It's not going to snowball. Next question. I go to work every day and I coach my football team.
Okay.
Is that good enough for you?
Now, here's Mike and Mike.
Here we are, back and better than ever. Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. All right, here's the deal. Roughly 3 weeks ago, the Cleveland Indians were 13 games over 500, and they had a run differential of plus 118. In the roughly 3 weeks that have ensued, the Indians are 20 games over 500 with a run differential of plus 102. It is one of the greatest stretches of baseball the game has ever seen. And Golick is basking in the glow. He's trying to change record books. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, there's a lot going on.
Sequestered himself in a room with Hembo, and I don't know what you two of you have cooked up over there.
There's a lot cooked up here, but the bottom line is the Indians are 20 wins. They tie the 0-2 A's with their 20 straight wins. Next on the list for them is going to be the 1935 Chicago Cubs, who have won 21. They have won 21 games in a row. And I'll be honest, Greeny, I'll just say it right now. I'm not acknowledging the 1916 New York Giants 26-game winning streak.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Golick, I don't know what happened, but for the moment I've gotten here, he and Hembo have locked themselves in like a little room, and he is trying to dismiss the 1916 Giants.
Can I just say, after my argument, you will agree with me.
Okay, so I look forward to that.
Okay.
I think that right now the Indians' biggest problem is not the 1916 Giants, it's the 2016 Cubs who beat them in 7 games in the World Series. That's the one you need to get over. The last time the Indians lost a game, which was August 23rd, McGregor and Mayweather had not fought yet. Not a single college football game had been played. Kyrie Irving was still on the Cavaliers. That feels like 4 teams ago.
You know what I would like to know if I were there and those close to the team, there have got to be some incredible superstitions would be the wrong thing, but guys doing the exact same thing. I mean, no. Baseball lends itself because of the number of games to superstitions, to doing the exact. This has to be ridiculous what's going on right now with some of the players and what they're doing.
Well, settle in because you're going to hear Terry Francona talking about just that in just a moment. But let's start with off the top. And again, it starts, of course, with the Indians, who beat the Tigers 2-0. Their win streak is now 20 games and counting.
Yeah, really impressive. 7th team in baseball history and 4th team in the modern era to win at least 20 games in a row, joining the 1916 Giants, who I will discredit very soon, 1935 Cubs, 2002 A's as well. And here's the deal. So Corey Kluber pitched last night. It was another shutout, this time 2-zip. They shut out the Detroit Tigers 2 times, 2 games in a row now, 7 shutouts during this 20-game streak. It's been amazing. And here's what you do, is you start looking at, they have 17 games left?
Yeah.
People are wondering about a 37-game winning streak because they only face one pitcher who has an ERA below 4. That's it. And that person has only had 4 starts. So they're not facing any great pitchers. They're not going to win. They're not going to win 37 in a row. But that's always the fun stuff to bring up. But they are on a tear right now, and they are 1 away from the legitimate record of the 1935 Chicago Cubs.
Boy, there's a lot of buildup to this discrediting of the 16 Giants.
Oh, and you're going to agree. You will say a win streak. You will agree with me.
I'm looking forward to it. Let's see what you got after this. The Dodgers beat the Giants 5-3. So hallelujah, the Dodgers finally won a game. They have the best record in baseball, and they had the longest losing streak of the season. It came to an end last night.
Kershaw pitched well. Remember his last outing, he got drubbed in just over 3 innings, so he pitched well here. 6 innings, gave up just 1 earned while striking out 6. The Dodgers also clinched a playoff spot for the 5th straight season, extending the longest streak in franchise history, and it was Kershaw who did it. So that 11-game losing streak is snapped, the longest losing streak in franchise since the franchise record, 16-game losing streak in 1944.
Off the top.
All right, Johnson & Johnson is usually something we associate with the Jets. Now we can attach it instead to the Arizona Cardinals. Down goes David Johnson as he's going to go on IR with the wrist, and so the Cardinals re-sign Chris Johnson.
Oh, I mean, remember, this guy came into the league. He was in the league 10 years, ran that 4.240 in the combine, was fast. First 6 years in Tennessee, 09, rushed for over 2,000 yards, had the league, by storm with what he was doing. And then he went to the Jets for a year.
I remember it well.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, he doesn't. And then he went to Arizona where he was later in the season. He broke his fibula, so he went on IR, comes back the next year. And then there's the emergence of David Johnson, who is going to have the surgery and may be back. They can put him on IR, but he can come back. They're looking maybe between Thanksgiving and Christmas for him to come back. We'll see with Chris Johnson, who was basically the last cut this year, and the last cuts that went on. He was basically the last player cut before the Cardinals started the season.
And finally, the Lakers announced they will retire Kobe Bryant's jersey twice, one time, which is to say they will retire both of his jerseys, the number 8 that he wore for 10 years and the number 24 that he wore for 10 years. They'll do both of those on December 18th.
He'll be the only player with 2 jerseys retired. He made the switch following the 2005-2006 season, and basically the numbers are almost identical. 10 years in one, 10 years in the other, 10 All-Star selections at number 24, 8 at number 8, 7 All-NBAs at number 24, 4 with number 8. But as far as points and assists, they're almost right on to one another with each jersey. So both jerseys going to the rafters.
And that is what everyone's talking about, which is brought to you by Dave & Buster's. Watch the games and play the games at your football headquarters, Dave & Buster's. All right, you've got my attention. I am dying to hear it. How are you going to discount the longest win streak in baseball history, which belongs to the 1916 New York Giants?
Yes, it really doesn't. And with apologies to these guys and their families, with apologies to the likes of Heine Zimmerman, Heine Stanford.
Wait, hold on a second. They had 2 Heines?
2 Heines. 2 guys, their name was Henry, but they were Heine. Heine Zimmerman, Heine Stafford.
They had a guy named Heine Zimmerman?
Heine and Heine Stafford. And Ralph Stroud, who was Sailor Stroud.
They had Sailor Stroud?
Yep. George Kelly, who was High Pockets Kelly.
High Pockets Kelly? That sounds like a guy in a mobster movie.
Yeah, it does. William Parrott, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but Paul Parrott, and Harry, is it Sally, Sallee, Slim Sally.
So they had Heine Zimmerman, Heine Stafford, Sailor Stroud, High Pockets Kelly, Paul Parrott, and Slim Sally.
There you go.
Is that why you're discounting them, just because they had goofy names?
I'm saying with apologies to them and their families of what I'm about to do. They are on record, longest winning streak in modern era.
Yeah.
1916 New York Giants, 26 in a row.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So when you think 26 in a winning streak, what do you think? In those 26 games, what did they do?
They won 26 games.
In a row, right?
Yeah, of course.
Point of order. Point of parliamentary procedure.
Parliamentary, but go ahead.
Whatever.
Yeah.
A point. This team, they won 12 in a row. They tied.
Oh.
And then they won 14 in a row. That is not a win streak. That is a 26-game unbeaten streak. Not a win streak. So not only should they not have the 26-game win streak as a record, their win streaks shouldn't be even near the top. It should be in the record books today. 12-game winning streak and a 14-game winning streak. And if you want to say a 26-game unbeaten streak, okay, I'm fine with that. But it is not, I repeat, it is not a 26-game winning streak.
Well, actually, you happen to be 1,000% right.
I am.
And now that you've told me what this is, they've put it up on my screen. On September 18th, they tied the second game of a doubleheader. The game was called after the top of the 9th inning with a score of 1-1, presumably due to darkness. So, which is funny, the fact that they're just presuming that. But
why didn't they just turn the lights on?
Remember. You're so funny. Okay, here's the point, though.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. One, wouldn't that make it a 27-game unbeaten streak? Right, the tie would be
a game.
Would include that.
Yes.
So it would be, but it absolutely isn't
not
a winning
a 26-game winning streak.
No, it's not.
12 games, tie, 14 games. It is not a 26-game winning streak. And, they called the game in the 19th, whatever the reason. Did it count or did it not?
Okay, hold on now. The Elias Sports Bureau is disagreeing with you. They say it is the longest winning streak. It's the record for most consecutive wins because a tie game breaks neither a winning streak or a losing streak.
They're wrong. They're wrong. If you tie, there's no win and it's not a loss. So you go to unbeaten. You don't say win. It is not a win streak. They tied. That broke the 12-game win streak. They tied. And then they had another 14-game win streak. So overall, it's a 27-game unbeaten streak.
All right, I'm begging you to stop doing that. But here is the one thing I would ask.
Yeah.
Did they make up that game? Did it ended in a tie? They left it that way.
Hembo? Did they leave it that way?
They leave it that way.
All right, so we got to get Steve Hurt on from the Elias Sports Bureau, and I think we got to go toe to toe with him.
Well, you get Steve Hurt on. I'm going to get Golick's hammer because this is going to be solved.
You are bigger than Steve.
Yeah,
he is. And you know Steve obviously well for years from Elias Sports Bureau. He was in the booth and all the Monday night games and everything else. We've known Steve for years, and he's the man behind the curtain at the Elias Sports Bureau.
I don't want to hear the tie.
I would like to have this conversation with Steve.
It's got to do something. It's got to mean something. They didn't win 26 consecutive games.
I actually agree with you.
Thank you.
It is a 27-game unbeaten streak, but it is not a 26-game win streak.
And within the 27-game unbeaten streak, they had a 12-game winning streak and a 14-game winning streak.
Now, it might change my perspective if that game ended in a if there was a tie there that they then finished later in the season or something like that. But that game ends as a tie. So it is not a win.
No, it's not.
It is not a win.
Not a win, not a loss.
So if that came in the middle of 26 games that they had lost, I would call it a 27-game winless streak, but not a 27-game losing streak.
No, it's exactly
I actually think you're right.
I am. No, that's not actually. I am right.
Well, Elias says you're not.
Elias is wrong. Elias, look at me right now, Elias. You're wrong. Okay? My Indians are one away from the true win streak, the 1935 Chicago Cubs.
This is actually worth talking about.
You're darn right it is.
I will send a note to Steve. He just sent me a note the other day about something entirely different.
Oh, you have his number?
I have his email.
Note. I'll call him.
Okay, I don't know if I have his number.
I want to call him.
Let me see if his number shows up on his signature line. Let's see here. Yes, I have his number.
All right, Steve. And Steve, you better come correct, my friend. Don't give me this. A tie isn't a win. It isn't a loss. It's just to feel good. No. It's not a win, not a loss.
I mean, now you're disparaging Steve Hurt, who did nothing here.
Listen, is he part of that statement that was written?
I don't know that. I mean, he owns Elias Sports Bureau, so I suppose he is
him.
then, yeah.
That's him. He wrote
is
it.
Elias. He personally wrote that?
That note is from him.
That note
is his quote.
Is specifically from Steve.
From Steve.
All right, I'll read it again.
Ridiculous, Steve.
It is the longest winning streak. It is the record for most consecutive wins because a tie game breaks neither a winning streak or a losing streak because it always gets replayed unless the season ends first. So now what we have to get to the bottom of was in 1916, it came on September 18th. That would have been the very end of the season. Would they have completed that game if the season didn't end? And does that factor in?
If they completed that game and they won it, then it would be a 27-game win streak.
That's correct. You're right, Mike. I have to say, I hate to say this because
Steve, I quite honestly don't think you're up to the task of running Elias.
No.
All right, I question your credentials.
The Giants apparently had 3 ties that year. Okay, this actually is an interesting little side note. Far more interesting than I expected it to be. I will give you
I'm
that.
Not just some dumb jock here.
Well, yeah, you are. But, I mean, I think that in this particular case, you might have a reasonable point. And the Bickler has your hammer. Bickler, go ahead, bring it on up. Bring up the ceremonial Golick's hammer. Once again, in conjunction with our understanding of the meaning of the term Occam's razor, we have developed Golick's hammer, which is the principle by which, in any dispute between two people, see Hurt, Steve, Golick, Mike, at the end of the day, the bigger, stronger one wins.
Steve? That's all I have to say, man.
He banged his hammer. So we will get Steve on the phone. I've got his cell here, so we'll call Steve, and we'll get to the bottom of this, because I actually think it is worth pursuing.
Oh, it is.
Mike and Mike were presented by Progressive Insurance, and Steve Hurt will join us later, we hope, on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, if we can find a place for him, because Lord knows we're packed.
Oh, no. Listen, I'll bump anybody to get Steve on. Gruden, gone. Herbie, gone. Herm, no, Herm's not gone.
We got Gruden, Herbie, Field Yates. We'll
Gone.
bump Field Yates.
Gone.
We'll bench press Field Yates. We'll just
you know what? You know what I wonder, though, quite honestly?
Yeah.
Will Steve come on?
No, Steve will come on.
Will Steve come on and face the music of the truth that dispels his statement?
The hilarious part of this is that you are friends with Steve Hurt. You just don't remember who he is.
No, I don't.
You know Steve, and you like Steve.
There are plenty of friends I don't like. Okay? There are plenty of my friends that I can't stand. Okay?
Golick is losing friendships over the 1916 New York Giants, who once
Couple
again
of Heinies.
featured such legends as Heine Zimmerman, Heine Stafford, Sailor Stroud, High Pockets Kelly, Pole Parrott, and Slim Sally. So let it be written.
So let it be done.
Okay, let's get back to this win streak, though, and let's go at the mics, which is brought to you by Dove Men Plus Care. Did you know that 91% of guys that use Dove Men Plus Care antiperspirant recommend it? So if you're heading to the gym right now, why not pick some up on the way? Here's Tim Kirchin on this win streak. He says it may be the greatest of all time.
They've outscored their opponents by 102 runs.
That's pretty good.
20 games. Only 6 teams have a better run differential for the season than the Indians have for the last 20 games. It has been unbelievable. The last team to have a run differential like this over any 20-game period was the 1939 Yankees, one of the greatest teams of all time, and the team that holds the greatest run differential for a season, plus 411. That's the company that the Indians are in right now, and it is just breathtaking to watch. This almost by definition has to be the greatest winning streak that any of us have ever seen.
Let me add another number to that. During this streak, they have allowed 32 total runs.
20 games.
And they've hit 39 home runs.
My goodness.
I mean, it really is, all kidding aside, and we're having fun with this, even though the Giants' record will be discounted. It really is an incredible streak that's going on.
You know, here's the one thing The 0-2 A's also won 20 straight games, and that's the American League record, and so now the Indians have tied it, and they could break it. They have an afternoon game today. The thing I'd be interested in is, A, what was their run differential? Do you happen to have that, the A's run differential?
The A's was...
Hembo's pointing at you, saying you have it.
Okay, I don't see it.
Plus 76.
76.
It's 76.
So it's not as good as 102, obviously. But my question is, does that matter? I mean, the objective is to win a game. So obviously the dominance, would that make the win streak, would you separate the win streaks based on run differential? They won their games more easily.
More dominating.
Dominatingly.
Because
Timmy just said it is almost by definition the best win streak we've seen. Well, we all saw 2002.
Yeah, we did.
The two of us were sitting right here in 2000. Well, in a different building, but we were doing the same thing in 2002. So what makes this streak better than that?
A's actually scored about half a run more per game in that streak. Way less run differential. Indians had a better ERA, 160 to 265 in that one. But, yeah, I mean, not only you look at how you're beating teams, but if you're destroying teams, and that would be run differential, that has to go into the equation. You know, you're winning 3-2 or you're winning 11-0. You know, there's something to just winning, and there's something to just destroying your team. There was another.
If you are doing that, then I would say it is the best winning streak that I've seen. That's the most dominant stretch of baseball that I've seen.
One thing they're doing well is they're jumping on teams, and this has a lot to do with it. They've outscored their opponents 64-12 in the first 3 innings during the streak. So they are just jumping on teams.
Now, forgive me if you said this already. I've looked at some of the stats on this. I haven't looked as much as I normally would. How much have they trailed in these 20 games? I mean,
I don't have that.
4 innings.
A total of 4 innings. That's unbelievable. They've trailed for 4 innings since August 23rd. That is really remarkable. So the Indians are red hot. You brought up the issue of superstitions.
Without that sport lends itself more to that, and I would imagine in this, man, guys are doing a lot of the same stuff.
Here's Terry Francona.
I got one really good buddy, one of my best friends, but he's notoriously bad luck. Everybody kind of refers to him as like the gray cloud. He knows who he is, and you talk about superstitions. I will not talk to him. He is a text only. Oh yeah, he knows. Cost me one job. He's not getting away again.
I have
He's
to
so
admit,
funny.
I'm not a guy of superstitions and doing that.
No,
but
you mock me for them.
But I would listen. Maybe one of the reasons is. As far as a win streak is concerned, I mean, I did a lot of the same things when I got ready, but I didn't have to. It was just kind of my routine, which I guess would be the same thing. But I never had a long winning streak, and I have to imagine if I'm the 07 Patriots and I'm winning, I'm 2-0, I'm 6-0, I'm 9-0, I'm 12-0, whatever, that at some point I may start doing the exact same things.
We did that in my family, and all we were was fans. The one year the Jets made it to the AFC Championship game, we ate in the same restaurant every single night. And I ordered the same food because it was working. And then A.J. Dewey happened, and that was the end of that. Okay, so we will get Steve Hurd on the phone, which I'm really looking forward to. A, because he has the best voice of anyone you'll ever hear. B, because I'd like to actually, I will mediate this. I will be Harold Henderson.
All screaming aside and having fun aside, I think it is a point.
That's what I'm saying. I think you have a legitimate point. I do believe that there should be three different delineations. There should be win streaks.
Right.
There should be unbeaten streaks.
Right.
Well, and I guess that's only two. So, and then eventually you lose. So they should separate the win streak from the unbeaten streak.
Right.
I understand they have an unbeaten streak, but I do believe that the winning streak is interrupted by a tie. I actually agree with you. I'm looking forward to talking to Steve about that as we go. Field Yates is going to jump in here. Huge fantasy decisions being made today.
Hey everyone, Mike Golick here. Support for the Mike and Mike podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. Rocket Mortgage is simple, allowing you to fully understand all the details and be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS, consumeraccess.org number 3030.
Guys don't really talk about antiperspirant. Despite that, 91% of Dove Men Plus Care users recommend it. Here's what they said.
It blocks the, perspiration, I think is the fancy word.
It's comfortable. It smells nice. My girl likes the smell.
Well, it's hard.
I think it's quite masculine. My underarms aren't the worst thing at the gym.
It's kind of like the Hoover Dam from my armpits, I guess.
Dove Men Plus Care antiperspirant. Tough on sweat, not on skin.
All right, so Field Yates is here, and the most important thing we're going to do with Field here is go through the waiver wire stuff for your fantasy teams and get a bunch of football conversation going. But, Field, you're an allegedly smart guy, so what I would like to do... Well, you're one of those people who comes off as smart. I can...
You do. That is true.
That I will take.
I can't verify it, but for the purposes of television, where you really don't need to be a whole lot deeper than you portray, then we're all good here.
Cool.
I think Golick is right on something, and I never would have thought that in a dispute between Mike Golick and the Elias Sports Bureau, I would side with Golick. But
now
Mike,
I'm curious.
As briefly as you can, sum up your belief on the win streak of the 1916 New York Giants.
They're in the record books as the longest win streak at 26 games, and the 35 Cubs at 21 and the Indians at 20. I say the Cubs is the true record because in that 26-game win streak, what do you have to do every single game?
Win?
Okay. The Giants, in that win streak, they won 12 games. They tied.
Yep.
And then they won 14 games. So it is not a 26-game win streak. It's a 27-game unbeaten streak.
Completely agree.
See, so do I. Now, the Elias Sports Bureau does not.
They're wrong.
Say a tie does not end a winning streak or a losing streak. That's their... I don't know. I mean,
they're wrong.
It's within their purview, I guess, to make that call, but I actually think I disagree with it.
I think it's a safe bet to assume that nobody from that 1916 team is still alive, but anybody who might be a diehard member of the 1916 team fan club, I apologize, but it is a win streak with an asterisk or not a win streak at all. It is two separate win streaks.
Yep. That's exactly right.
I think that if in my book, in the non-Elias Sports Bureau book, but the Field Yates Encyclopedia of Sports, if the Indians win the next two games, give them the record.
I agree with that. I agree. And you're right. These players not around. But we have apologies to the families of Heine Zimmerman, Heine Stafford, Sailor Stroud, High Pockets Kelly, Paul Parrott, and Slim Sally.
High Pockets Kelly.
High Pockets Kelly.
Wow. He sounds like a character from Johnny Dangerously.
I would fit in with that team.
Two Heinies on that team.
Did you ever see the movie Johnny Dangerously, the Michael Keaton classic? Yeah, High Pockets Kelly, I think, was actually a character in that. Okay, so Field Yates is here. He's brought to you by DraftKings. Play free one-week fantasy football this Sunday at DraftKings. Just use the code Mike only at DraftKings.com. So we've got waiver wire action right now. We saw some interesting performances from names people may not have known. I fell in love with this Tariq Cohen in Chicago.
Sure.
Cooper. Who in the world is Cooper Kupp? Where did he come from?
I knew
the legend of Cooper Kupp.
Yeah.
Cooper Kupp and all of these guys who put up huge numbers this past weekend. So give us all the insight that we need.
Well, to start here, let's just say this. In week 1, there are players you identify on waiver wires because of injuries. Like, who is going to replace David Johnson in Arizona, who is now on the injured reserve list? And Bruce Arians said last night, hey, we hope to get him back by Christmas, as in week 16 of the NFL season. There are other players that you see in week 1, like Tariq Cohen or a Cooper Kupp, that you say they weren't on the radar as much because we didn't know what kind of ability they had because, hey, they're either rookies or they're guys that entering their second season start to break out. So you've named a couple of the most notable players that were probably added overnight on ESPN.com. Tariq Cohen might be the most popular name. He had 12 targets for the Bears, and that backfield could be dynamic with him and Jordan Howard, consecutive hits in the draft for GM Ryan Pace. Kenny Golladay, also a name of note. Now, Golladay was one of those guys that blows up OTAs and minicamp. You say to yourself, like, what is this worth? Like, some guy who's running around in a helmet and a practice jersey with no pads, is it worth anything? Then he had 2 preseason touchdowns in week 1. And then in the regular season, he had 2 more week 1 touchdowns. So Kenny Golladay, 3rd-round pick out of Northern Illinois, another keeper for the Detroit Lions. They're going to throw the ball a ton because if the early returns are any indication, they can't run it again this year. Golladay, Cooper Kupp, Tariq Cohen. And Tyrod Taylor's still available in a ton of leagues, which is surprising to me because over the past 2 years, he has been a top 10 fantasy quarterback. And it is not in the same way that someone like Drew Brees gets it done. Brees will probably challenge for 5,000 passing yards again this year. But if a player has 500 rushing yards as a quarterback, which is what Tyrod Taylor is a pretty steady bet for, that equates to 1,250 passing yards for other players. So he doesn't have to throw for 4,000, 5,000 yards to still be a top 10 quarterback again this year.
Where was Kareem Hunt in all the pre-draft stuff for fantasy draft for that 3rd rounder out of Toledo? Just absolutely exploded onto the scene Thursday night.
By the time, so after the Spencer Ware injury, which I think took place in the 3rd week of the preseason, it was Spencer Ware, Julian Edelman, and consecutive nights in the 3rd preseason game. Kareem Hunt skyrocketed to around, I would say, about running back 15 in terms of average draft position. But people who really believed in Kareem Hunt were willing to take him in the 2nd round.
Really?
Matthew Berry, our colleague here at ESPN, certainly was. He says he calls Kareem Hunt his ride or die. Basically, if Kareem Hunt became a home run, Matthew Berry was going to be looking very intelligent. If Kareem Hunt busted and did not meet expectations, it was going to be, something, guys? I misplayed my hand here. But so far, the early returns suggest that Matthew Berry, maybe he would have insight as to whether or not a 26-game winning streak with a tie in between would count as an undefeated streak or whatever we were classifying it as. Yes, but Kareem Hunt did skyrocket quite a bit, and if week 1 proves to be what he will do with any sort of regularity, he is the ultimate keeper this year.
I'm looking at Mike and Field Yates here, and we're looking primarily at this moment at the fantasy angle of different things. I'm looking at like the New York Giants, for example.
Yeah.
They're going to get Odell Beckham back at some point. They can't run the football at all.
Yeah.
Would this suggest to me that Eli Manning, his stock all of a sudden rises as a fantasy quarterback, as bad as that offense looked the other day, because he's just going to fling it all season long?
Yeah, I think there's a chance that Eli and Matthew Stafford, amongst other, Carson Palmer will be this way with no David Johnson, are so pass reliant that it doesn't matter how it gets done. As long as it gets done for fantasy purposes, the points count all the same. My concern with the Giants is the same that everybody else has. The offensive line is so bad, you can't get a running game going. You become more predictable, and that Cowboys defense is not a bunch of play wreckers, right? Like it was an okay defense last year on a per play basis, but talent-wise, it doesn't stack up to others in the NFL, and they made that Giants offense look pedestrian. But maybe Odell Beckham Jr. is the straw that stirs the drink, and everything changes once he's back in the lineup, which we presume could happen as soon as this Monday night right here on ESPN when they play the Lions. we'll see. So I don't know that I have a firm grip on what exactly this Giants offense looks like and what exactly Eli's fortunes are for this year until we at least see one game with Odell Beckham Jr.
In a fantasy where everybody's going to take this guy with one of the top picks, is there any trepidation for Le'Veon Bell and the holdout and coming back, only 13 touches in the first game on when he gets going?
It's a bit disconcerting, if for no other reason, that you may not have won your week in week one because of Le'Veon Bell, and you always feel confident that you're going to win, especially right out of the gates with the consensus top 2 player in fantasy football drafts. And Mike Tomlin has put a decent chunk of his average performance, I think it was 10 carries, 32 yards from Le'Veon Bell, on penalties, and sort of felt like they just got themselves into bad running situations. I'd say that, one thing I was encouraged by, if I'm a Browns fan, was that defense. And, coordinators, when they get hired, always talk about we want to play fast and aggressive. We want to be flying around to the ball. With Greg Williams, that actually is often the case. Yeah. The Browns defensive coordinator, and they looked good defensively on Sunday. They looked okay offensively too. I'm not concerned if I'm a Le'Veon Bell owner. I would say this: our week 2 rankings are up. So if you're trying to set your lineup already, good chance to do so as soon as actually on Tuesdays as of this year. And Le'Veon Bell was my number 1 running back, and I didn't think too hard about moving him anywhere else.
2 more quickly for you here, Field, before we let you go. We've talked about people to add. How about people to drop? Are there highly touted or reasonably touted players that you think people might want to reconsider?
There are a couple. So Eli, if you're trying to upgrade your quarterback, Eli Manning would have been one that you say to yourself, all right, I'm a little bit nervous there. Eddie Lacy was a player that I'm a bit nervous about right now at the Seattle Seahawks as well. Generally speaking, though, I don't like to cut bait too frequently after week 1. Just because, things can change so dramatically. Guys that were awesome in week 1 can become just sort of ho-hum, and guys that were ho-hum in week 1 can bounce back and look like superstars.
And then finally, and we're waiting for some sort of announcement of a decision for tomorrow night, but all signs seem to be pointing to Deshaun Watson becoming the starting quarterback of the Texans. Now, with Bill O'Brien, I guess you never know, but in theory, for the final 15 games of the season, is he a player that fantasy players want?
I say this, he's intriguing only because anytime you have a quarterback that is functionally athletic and mobile, like he is, you've got the upside of rushing. I was just talking about how Tyrod Taylor, on average, can push for 40 rushing yards a game, somewhere in that neighborhood, and that can be, or even if it's 35, that's still good enough over the course of the season to make a major difference. So for Deshaun Watson in 2 quarterback leagues, yes, of course he should be added because you start basically every quarterback depending on the size of your league. But I would say it's still more of a wait and see right now. I do believe in the player, though, long term. I think he's going to have a bright future in the NFL. More likely than not, is how one person smartly said it to me before the draft, that he becomes a true hit in the NFL. I think that's the case. And as you said, probably could be as soon as tomorrow night.
All right, he is Field Yates, and once again, he is on the side of Golick's hammer in this dispute.
That's right.
Between Golick and the Elias Sports Bureau, one where I never thought I'd fall on this side, but I agree with Golick, too. Field, thank you very much,
Field.
as always.
Yes.
And don't forget, Field Yates Sundays on Operation Football with Andrew Hawkins, 1 to 7 Eastern, all afternoon long on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Coming up next, this weekend, one of the most significant sporting events of the entire year. Will you be in?
Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling that you're safe to enjoy the things that matter most. ADT lets you take that feeling with you, whether you're at home, your business, or online. We help keep you safe with security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling for less than $1 a day. ADT, home, safe home.
All right, Golick may be wrong.
No,
You
I'm
may
not.
be wrong.
No.
Stand by. We have received new information. And again, this is the beauty of doing this stuff live. Again, the 1916 New York Giants have the record for the longest win streak in baseball history, 26 consecutive games. The current Cleveland Indians are at 20 and counting. Golick wants to discount the 1916 Giants because there was a game in the middle of that streak in which they tied.
Yes.
However, and to the point that the Elias Sports Bureau made, in the final standings that season, that game does not appear. There are no ties in the final standings. So it is as though it never happened. So in baseball, and everyone knows this, a game, you'll always hear the announcer say, well, now it's official. Put it in the books. The legendary Cal Ripken game, it becomes an official game when it gets through 5 innings. Because if it's rained out after 3.5 or whatever it is.
Hey, those are valid reasons.
They play it in its entirety. And the stats don't count. So if a guy hits 4 home runs before the 5th inning and the game then gets rained out, it's as though
that's
those
not the
home
point
runs
here.
never
I
took
get
place.
it. How many innings did this game go?
9.
It went 9 innings.
But they
you
didn't
can't
count
just
it. It
say,
didn't count.
oh, it doesn't count.
It doesn't count.
Just make up a rule. A 9-inning game doesn't count. That's ridiculous. Hey, if you want the 5-inning thing, I get that. I understand that. This game went 9 innings. They couldn't finish it. They called it a tie. You can't then tell me, oh, by the way, it didn't happen. It happened. They didn't win, and they didn't lose. So they didn't get a loss, but they didn't get a win. But it is not, they can't continue the win streak.
I think that it does, however, change the dynamic at least a little. I think it is an interesting point that is being made here, and we can continue to look into it as we go. Again, we'll get Steve Hurt on. This certainly does change the dynamic for me a little bit, and we'll see what he says. Huge hour coming with John Gruden and Kirk Herbstreit. But right now, big question for you. I'm really fascinated to know.
News you didn't even know you needed or even want.
Well, if I was you, I'd do something about it.
These are Mike and Mike's Nerd Notes.
All right, and involved a fight this weekend. One of the biggest sporting events of the year is coming up this weekend, and I'm dying to know if you're planning on watching it. Our Nerd Notes brought to you by Dell. Need help finding the right Dell PCs with Intel Core processors for your business? Call 877-BUY-DELL. You can talk to a Dell small business tech advisor.
Nerd alert!
The fight, after nearly 2 years of negotiations, is on. Canelo Alvarez and Triple G facing off for the WBA, WBC, and IBF middleweight titles. Alvarez attempting to win a share of the middleweight title for the second time in his career, though he says he will not accept the WBC belt if he wins.
Nerd alert!
Triple G making his 19th straight middleweight title defense since he won the title in 2010. His 18 straight, the second most in history behind Bernard Hopkins' streak of 20.
Nerd alert!
Alvarez fighting for the 8th time around Mexican Independence Day, which is September 16th. He's 6-1 in those fights. He's knocked out all 6 of his opponents in the fights he won. His only loss was to Floyd Mayweather.
Nerd alert!
And it's the second time that Canelo in his last 20 fights has been an underdog. The only other time was in the Floyd Mayweather fight. So those are your Nerd Notes surrounding Triple G and Canelo Alvarez. And all of the talk when they scheduled and snuck in, if you will, Mayweather and McGregor was they got that thing in ahead of this fight, which in everyone's estimation is the more legitimate and interesting fight for the boxing fan.
For the boxing fan, without a doubt. I mean, the other was a show. The other was entertainment. The other was we were hoping to see some kind of spectacle.
So we have put a poll question up on the Mike and Mike page on Twitter.
Ooh, I have to retweet.
Golick has to retweet that, and I've already done so. And here is the question. Did the Mayweather-McGregor fight help or hurt your chances of ordering this weekend's fight? And you have 4 options: helped, hurt, didn't watch either, had planned already to watch both. So I'm interested to know what your perspective, everyone out there, we talked a lot about it then. Are you watching this fight?
I had planned to watch it anyway.
This is boxing, so your vote is had planned to watch
it anyway. I separated the two. The one, just as I said, I wanted a show. I felt Mayweather was going to win this thing handily, but you watched it for that one punch by McGregor that may follow up with something. What was going to happen? This. I'm looking for a great boxing match. You got a guy that's 49-1-1, and another one that's 37-0. They both knock people out, standing in the ring swinging. So, I mean, I am really looking forward to this boxing match as opposed to what I bought in the other one, which was I bought a show. I bought entertainment. Here, I'm buying a boxing match.
Yeah, and there are more people in the country interested in being entertained than there are in a great boxing match, and that's why I'd like to get a little advanced perspective here. Cast that vote if you're on Twitter on the Mike and Mike page. How did that fight influence this fight? Gruden and Herbie in the next hour. Stay there, Mike and Mike.
First time skydiving?
Sure is.
Okay, you just open the door like this and you jump.
Oh, wait. Should we be like in tandem?
Tandem? That's a great idea.
Are you a certified instructor?
No, but I love parachutes and I love people. Here we go.
You wouldn't take chances with an uncertified skydiving instructor. Don't do it with your finances. Find a certified financial planner professional today at letsmakeaplan.org. CFP. Work with the highest standard.
America, it's time for some straight talk. You love your phone. Look at you. You hardly put it down. But you don't love that expensive wireless plan, do you? So what if I told you can keep that phone network and number 2 for a lot less? Well, this is me telling you. It's time to switch to Straight Talk, guys. Bring your own phone and get unlimited plans starting at just $45 a month on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks. Straight Talk Wireless. Only at Walmart.
Savings may vary. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
Every Wednesday on Mike and Mike, John Gruden and a little classic rock and roll. How are you, John?
Hey, good morning, guys. Have you ever seen that video? YouTube that video. Panama, that is a great, great selection.
That's something else this generation misses out on. Great music videos.
Yeah.
MTV, when they actually showed music videos and how great that was.
Star on the helmet for whoever chose that song for John today. Good and safe. Good morning, John Gruden. And let's dive right into some of this conversation here. You've got a very interesting game coming up this coming Monday with the Lions and the Giants. But I want to start by going back to the game you had the other night with New Orleans and Minnesota. And let's pick it up with Adrian Peterson. When the Saints first signed him, it seemed like an odd fit. Mike and I talked about it at the time. And watching that game, and I fully believe both he and Sean Payton when they say that there was no real sideline blow-up between them. But that doesn't change the fact that he does feel a little bit like a square peg in a round hole. What role do you envision Adrian Peterson playing in that New Orleans offense as the season goes on?
I think he's going to be a closer. I think he's going to be a guy they lean on late in games. I think they're going to lean on him in short yardage, perhaps goal line. And I think they're going to lean on him on some early downs, first down, 2nd and 1 to 3, to slam it up in there and set up some play-action passes. But, you know, if you watch the game, the Saints are missing their starting left tackle. That's significant. They lose their starting right tackle. Max Unger, their center, he missed just about the entire preseason. And the Vikings are pretty good. So, you know, without getting all teary-eyed here, there's a lot to be written yet in the Adrian Peterson file in New Orleans, but he's going to have to get used to sharing the load with 2 other pretty good backs.
So along those lines, before, you know, when you're talking about signing him, how much, putting on the coaching cap here, how much does Sean Payton need to have a discussion with him, a guy that's used to being the man, to now be part of a scheme? What is that discussion like?
Well, I'm sure Sean had extensive discussions with him. That's how it goes during these free agent visits. I'm sure he told him that ball distribution is part of the program here. I mean, we have a great quarterback that's thrown for 5,000 yards 5 times, and we're not going to hand the ball off every play. We're going to keep Drew Brees at the forefront of the quarterback position. So I'm sure they were pretty obvious, and they laid things out. I don't think they counted on losing both their starting offensive tackles before the first game of the year, but that's football.
Mike and John Gruden, and on the other side, what a performance from Sam Bradford, who has been, I mean, I hate to say this, but sort of a dink and dunk kind of quarterback with extremely short passes. The numbers would back that up, and he was flinging it down the field on Monday. What did you see that was different in the scheme from Minnesota, and what do you think that suggests that their season may look like with Bradford getting off to that start?
You know, I got excited studying Bradford prior to the game. I thought he played incredible football last year. I know the sports statistical world has a lot of his passes going 10 yards or less, but Bradford got pummeled last year. He really did. They replaced all 5 starting linemen for a reason. Khalil's gone. T.J. Clemens is gone. Alex Boone got cut. Brandon Fusco is gone. They couldn't pass protect, and this man got punished a year ago and still threw 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, almost 4,000 yards, and broke an NFL record for completion percentage. And he had his offensive coordinator resign in week 7, and he just got there a week before the season. So Bradford can play. When was the last time he was in a premier situation? You know, he was drafted by the Rams. That was a bad team. He was a young quarterback. Then he went to Philadelphia and played in a no-huddle, never-seen-before offense. Then he gets traded the week before the season. I think what you're seeing, make a long story short, is Sam Bradford finally in a destination where they've got a pretty good offensive line, an incredibly talented young back, some emerging receivers, and one hell of a defense.
So let's go there for a moment, because I highlighted that offensive line yesterday, and you just mentioned, again, 5 new starters. First, I'd like to know if you've ever seen that in your career coaching, where next year you come in with 5 brand new starters on the O-line. They were dead last year in rushing. I love the outside zone scheme with the speed of Dalvin Cook. So first, from that standpoint of just meshing 5 new guys together from the previous year.
No, I've never seen that. We never did that in the preseason game. I mean, that's unbelievable. And when you look at the Vikings play their 4 preseason games, these 5 starters that you saw play on Monday night had 0 reps together. There were bits and pieces where they played one at a time or 3 or 4 at a time, but they hadn't played one collective snap together until Monday night. Credit Tony Sperano, the line coach. Riley Reef, he moved over from right tackle to left tackle where he played in Detroit last year. And Mike Remmers, and you have to give them an incredible amount of credit. The rookie center to boot.
Mike and John Gruden, I hope I didn't just lose the phone there. Did we just lose John?
I'm here.
Okay, good. Thank you. John Gruden is with us there. I thought that the phone died for just a brief second. Let's look ahead to your game. This coming week will be the Lions and the Giants. And I want to lump both the Giants and the Seahawks into this question, John. I asked it to several people yesterday. I mean, their offensive lines looked just awful in week 1. The Giants, who we sort of knew that was going to be a problem coming into the season, it manifested itself in every way that it possibly could Sunday night against the Cowboys. And similarly, I thought for Seattle in Green Bay. Is that something that can get better as the season goes on without changing personnel? What do you, let's look specifically at the Giants because that's who you have this coming Monday. What can they do to make that offensive line more effective as they go through their season? Because right now it looks like an Achilles heel they couldn't overcome.
Oh, that's a complex question. I've always thought that the up-tempo, no-huddle operation that they like to use with Eli Manning is tough on an offensive lineman. I mean, put yourself in Eric Flowers' shoes. You're a left tackle. You go to the line of scrimmage. You never know who to block. You don't know what the play is because Eli Manning is going through all these dummy snap counts and code words to try to decipher what play to get to, and then, boom, 6 seconds before the ball is snapped, you get the play, and then you got to get a call, and then you got to get a block, and it's one play after another. It's hard. And remember, there's a lot of line play right now that's not very good. I trace that back to training camp. Watch the Bengals play. You said Seattle. Some of these teams have a lot of new players. The Lions have a new left tackle. They've got a new right tackle. They've got a lot of new parts. It's going to take time, and we don't practice hard, and we don't put the pads on very often. Good luck.
And speaking of new players, Deshaun Watson, all signs point toward him very likely getting the start tomorrow. How do you go about that with a rookie quarterback? He goes in for the second half of the game last week, short week of preparation, and then you may be going with a rookie quarterback.
Oh, you might have to talk them into starting after watching their offensive line play last week. I mean, they gave up 11 sacks. Calais Campbell had 4. You might not want to show them the film from last week. That was a horrific start. But, man, Cincinnati needs this game. They're coming off a bad performance, and they've got a pretty good front. I just think you got to really simplify the game plan, have a pretty solid protection plan, and put some bootlegs and some no-huddle things in where Deshaun is completely comfortable because this is a tough order going against the Bengals on a short week. Both teams not feeling good about themselves.
Take us back to your experience with him at the quarterback camp and everything else and all of your preparation for him leading up to the draft. You know, for those who don't remember, and it feels like so long ago already, you know, your thoughts on him, your expectations for him coming in, because one of the many things that I remember everyone saying was he's the most ready because of the experience he had in college. He's the most ready to start playing immediately.
Well, he does have a lot of playing experience, Mike, but he hasn't been in and out of a huddle. He hasn't really run a diverse scheme, meaning they don't change personnel often. They don't have a lot of sophisticated snap counts and audibles, so I'm sure Bill O'Brien, who comes from New England in a really incredibly sophisticated world of offense, is trying to make the transition, teach him what he wants him to do, and at the same time, he's going to have to perhaps do some things that Deshaun is already comfortable doing. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some no-huddle offense Thursday night.
John, because there's only 16 games, there can be a lot of overreaction each and every week. And going back to the Thursday game, which seems like about a year ago, should there be some in New England, losing at home, a place they're so used to winning and being beaten the way they did in the fourth quarter? Any kind of lasting effects from that in your mind?
Certainly. I think Bill Belichick said a couple of years ago, and I agree, that the first 3 or 4 games of the regular season are an extension of the preseason. When you played, Mike, when I coached several years ago, our players actually had 2-a-day practices, pads, and played quite a bit in the preseason. When you look at a lot of these teams, many of these players didn't play more than 35 or 40 snaps the entire preseason. So they really don't know what's coming out of the bag, these coaches. They really don't know what's going to show up. And a lot of these teams have no continuity, and New England's one of those teams. There's a lot of new players playing key roles that really haven't done that as Patriots. So it's going to be, I think, a little bit of time before we see exactly where they go.
Mike and Mike, John Gruden with us again. Lions-Giants is the Monday night game this week. Lions had a really interesting game this past week against Arizona where they turned Carson Palmer over repeatedly, and then Matt Stafford did what Matt Stafford does, which is throw a bunch of touchdowns in the fourth quarter to win the game. As you're looking over the tape of that game, what are you seeing from Detroit?
Well, they hang in there. It's a credit to Coach Caldwell. They didn't play real well in the first quarter. They fell behind, heard some boos, but you said it. Matt Stafford, he doesn't get enough credit for his scrambling ability, his ability to push the ball down the field from all kinds of different platforms, people underneath his feet. He's got to reset. He's got to make some difficult throws. He does it without any running game. I have not seen the Lions have a good running game in a long time, but they leaned on their quarterback, and their defense is better than people think up front. They can rush the passer, and they have a very opportunistic secondary. I like Glover Quinn a lot at the free safety position, and they've added DJ Hayden, the ex-Oakland Raider, and they get Quandre Diggs back to play the nickel corner. And with Darius Slay, that's a formidable outfit. I can't wait to see the Lions secondary go up against the Giants. I just hope Odell Beckham plays.
It's the Lions and the Giants in New Jersey. We'll see if Odell is there. We know John and company will for Monday Night Football. Thank you, John. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, John.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
John Gruden with us every Wednesday on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get instant gold status at Shell. Join the Fuel Rewards program now at fuelrewards.com/gold. I share that feeling with John. Regardless of what team you root for, I want to see Odell Beckham on the field. He's the most exciting player in the National Football League, and it would be nice to see him in the nationally televised spot and just in general. And I think they will look. How different will their offensive line look? How different will their whole offense look because he's on the field?
Well, I mean, again, it depends on the play call. You can hit him deep on plays where you got to block a little longer, or you can hit him with a slant and he goes 80 yards where you're getting rid of the ball quick. I get what John's point was about the O-line in their scheme, where Eli is trying to get a read on the defense of what he has before he calls the play, and then, as he said, you got 6 seconds to determine who you're going to block him and block him. The other side of that, I'll say, it's pro football. I mean, if you can't do that, then you can't play. I mean, there are a lot of
every team doing
not every team is doing that. But then I would say on the other side, if your offensive line is struggling and that's a reason, then you damn well better change it. Then as a coach, you better get out of that and say, you know what, I like running this, but if I don't have the personnel that can do it, then I can't do it. And that's a decision Ben McAdoo has to make and has to decide. But, there are absolutely, they're not the only team where an O-lineman has to make a quick few-second decision on who I'm blocking, what the scheme is, and what I have to do. You got to do it. That's your job. You have to decipher who you have to block, and you got to block them. I mean, that's part of being a pro is knowing what your responsibility is. And if the responsibility is too much in that case for linemen, then as I said, it's incumbent on the coach to get them out of that.
And they're playing a defense that's better than people think. If you watch the Lions play defense this past week, they had a defensive touchdown. They should have had two. Haloti Ngata had a ball right in his hands that he would have run back for a touchdown. It would have been another defensive touchdown. What did they intercept Carson Palmer 3 times?
I believe 3, yes.
So their defense is pretty good. And Matt Stafford, if you watch that game and you emerge from it still thinking Matthew Stafford is not worthy of every penny they pay him, that I don't know what you're watching. I don't even know what you're talking about. That guy is the whole offense. They don't have Calvin Johnson anymore. They don't even try. They don't even pretend they're going to run the ball. He just stands back there and flings it. And in the fourth quarter, when they wear teams down a little bit, he's just phenomenal. And I know that he makes some mistakes, and people will always say, well, they're always coming from behind because they're always losing. Because I get it. But at the end of the day, they win because he makes big plays late in games every single week.
They're never out of it, and that's what you have to recognize when you're facing them. Even if you get a lead on them, you know that they're Captain Comebacks.
All right, we still have a lot on this game that didn't count. We've got people defending Elias. We've got people defending Golic. Golic's hammer is being questioned this morning, which is not necessarily the way I meant that to sound, but you know what I'm pointing out. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Before anything else, Herbie, next.
Hey, everyone, Mike Golic here. Support for Mike and Mike podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Sports fans anywhere can earn a nationally recognized degree from Penn State. Online. Whether you're starting or finishing your degree, study where and when it's convenient for you. Choose from more than 125 programs to become a top prospect in your field and advance your career. Learn more at worldcampusinfo.com. Penn State World Campus, a world of possibilities. Online. Visit worldcampusinfo.com today. That's worldcampusinfo.com.
All right, so much good college football stuff going on. Let's jump right into it here with Kirk Herbstreit, his regular weekly visit with us. College Game Day will be in Louisville for number 3 Clemson and 14 Louisville, and another great performance or great start to the season by Lamar Jackson. Yeah. Mike was just breaking it down for you on ESPN2. Good morning, Kirk Herbstreit.
Good morning. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Great. I want to start with the game that you guys had on Saturday night, which was fascinating, Ohio State and Oklahoma, and I was extraordinarily surprised. At halftime, I was positive Ohio State was going to win that game because Oklahoma so thoroughly dominated the first half and just couldn't nothing on the scoreboard reflected it. And then the second half happened and Baker Mayfield happened. How would you describe that performance by the quarterback, by the team, and what do you think that sets up for Oklahoma potentially for the rest of this year?
Well, first, I think you have to recognize the job that Lincoln Riley and Mike Stoops with the defense, just the preparation that Oklahoma had. I don't know if it was the loss to Ohio State a year ago. They had won 10 straight. There was a lot of buildup during the week about Baker Mayfield referring to Ohio State beating them in Norman. And I don't know if you guys have watched Baker Mayfield closely in the last 3 years, but it's not like, wow, who's this Baker Mayfield? That's kind of who he is. He's incredibly competitive, kind of a chippy guy. It's just how he plays the game. And so I wasn't necessarily surprised by his performance, but I was really surprised by the youth around him and the way they played with such maturity. And they were, like I said, they were just so well prepared. There wasn't anything that surprised them. And so it really paid off. They probably could have won by even a larger margin if you think about the first half and, going for it on fourth down a couple times and that type of thing. But they dominated the game. They deserve all the credit. Lincoln Riley is both a head coach and a play caller, had his team ready to go. And Mike Stoops, this is the guy that maybe 10 years ago was known as one of the deans of the defensive side of the ball. And for whatever reason, Oklahoma's just kind of gotten away from being that dominating defense in recent years. And it's the best they have looked at the corner spots and just with the kind of the aggressive attitude for 4 quarters. It's the best they've looked in years. And now the question for me with Oklahoma is clearly by their emotions after the game, they wanted to win this game pretty badly. Can they maintain that energy? In the past, Oklahoma was a peak and valley, a peak and a valley type of team. They need to be consistent. That can't be their season beating Ohio State. It needs to be one hurdle of 12 or 13 or 14 games. So I want to see how they react to winning a game like that. And if they play with that kind of energy the rest of the year, man, it's going to be hard for anybody to beat that team.
Saying with that game on the other side with Ohio State, and I don't want to act like I'm just saying it now. I've been saying it for the last couple of years. JT Barrett has not done a lot to impress me as a passer. He never really has. And right. Ohio State has never been in a position where they have to pass themselves back into games. But if that's the case, Herbie, unfortunately, I don't think they have a whole lot of other options. But that does seem to be an Achilles heel for this team. How do you see that going forward?
Well, there's talk about should they sit him and play one of the younger guys. To me, at this point, I wouldn't go there if I were Urban Meyer. If you go back to 2014 when he was a freshman and he replaced Braxton Miller, he had 10 days when Braxton Miller went down with an injury, and it's like, okay, we're going to go with you. You're number 16. You're starting. 10 days to get ready for their first game. And by the end of the year, I think he ended up finishing 5th in the Heisman Trophy race that year. And he was running and throwing. To me, the difference was what was around him. You had Zeke Elliott as a younger player who was still a very dominant player in the backfield. You had Devin Smith, who was I think he still plays with the Jets, but he's a guy that could get vertical and get behind defenses that were loading up against that running game. You had Michael Thomas, who plays for the Saints, who's another guy that could hit a quick slant and go 80 yards. So they had big playability within their passing game to make defenses have to respect that aspect of their game. They've not had that in 15, 16, and now 2 games into 17. They don't have that. And so until they prove not just that JT Barrett can throw, but they have receivers that can make you pay for crowding a line, until they prove that, they're going to face the same style of defense week in and week out. Now, some teams won't be gifted enough athletically to hold up, but when they face teams with equal or better talent, they're going to be in a quandary until they prove that they can do this. And to me, I'd expect them against Army this week, UNLV, Rutgers, teams with lesser talent. They're going to go back to just Urban Meyer football. Roll up their sleeves, pound the rock, get physical, set up play action off of that to avoid what, Mike, you alluded to, when they're in obvious passing situations. The real test will come when Penn State comes to town. Then you'll find out how much they've actually improved.
Mike and Herbie, College Game Day this week. Another monster game again, as I mentioned, Louisville and Clemson. So here's Lamar Jackson's chance with the huge spotlight against the huge opponent. Give us your sense of what we expect there. And Jackson, as I mentioned, with the performances that he's had so far, has put himself right in the middle of another Heisman conversation.
Well, not just this year, it's just how that game ended last year and the implications of that game. I mean, that game was built up very similar to the way it is now. And that game came down to the final drive. And if you remember that one of the Louisville receivers on a 4th down play with about a minute to go in the game, they're driving, they're inside the red zone. He catches the ball near the sideline. Instead of cutting back inside to fight for a first down to get inside maybe the 5-yard line, he cuts outside and ends up a yard short, goes out of bounds. And so to me, this almost feels like that the next quarter. It's like we're going to the 5th quarter because that game was so good last year. And you have so many of the pieces back with Lamar Jackson won the Heisman. He's got some playmakers around him that can really make big plays. And then the Clemson defense. They're as athletic and as strong as any defense you'll see in college football. And Brent Venables, I would argue the last 3 years, has probably been the best defensive coordinator in the game. And so to see Brent Venables' defense against Lamar Jackson, I mean, that's what everybody is going to be watching to see and going to the stadium to see. And last time I got excited to go up to a Louisville game, it was the same week, it was to watch Florida State. And Florida State went up to Louisville with a very athletic defense, and they looked like a bunch of 5th graders running around trying to stop Lamar Jackson. He's the most electrifying quarterback with the ball in his hand since Michael Vick when he was at Virginia Tech. And if you do not corral him, if you do not have leverage on the football, he's going to make people miss and make them look silly. So Clemson did a pretty good job of it a year ago at home, but it's a different game on the road. So how that defense plays and how they prevent him from making a big play, if they can do that, that'll probably dictate the flow of the game.
A game that was going on the same time as yours. I was there in South Bend as Georgia came up there and brought a nice contingent of fans with them. And I think, as I talked about after that game, their speed on defense really showed, and certainly the rushing attack on offense to get the 1-point win over Notre Dame. I know there were some issues with Brian Kelly and dealing with a reporter after that game, but on the field, how do you assess both these teams as Georgia goes on, obviously, to play that SEC schedule? So obviously Tennessee and Florida, Auburn on the schedule, and Notre Dame still obviously with Stanford and USC and Miami on their schedule on where these teams are.
As you know, it's still early in the season to kind of definitively know where we are with all these teams. For Georgia to go on the road and win that kind of game, you talk about a boost to morale with a young quarterback like that to go on the road. And I know his numbers weren't off the charts, but he didn't lose the game in that environment. You can rally around that, and I really like the kid's skill set at quarterback. It's he can throw it. I think he can keep plays alive with his legs when he needs to. So I like the feel of Georgia, and of course they have the two backs in the backfield. It's going to get a lot tougher for them, once they get into conference play, and you went down to some of their schedule and who they have to play still. But with an athletic defense and with the SEC East being wide open, Georgia with that quarterback right now, they're definitely right in the mix, and I have to say, to me, the favorite with the way Florida has looked so far offensively. With Notre Dame, let's see how they respond to this. Their defense was so bad a year ago. The fact that they're playing and they're running to the ball and playing with a little bit of an attitude, I think Mike Elko deserves a lot of credit coming over from Wake to get them to be playing with a little bit of chippiness to them. I like Brandon Wimbush. I'd love to see a little bit more big play ability in that backfield. Josh Adams is a physical guy, but if they could find somebody to complement him in that backfield, because much like what you were saying about Ohio State, I really feel like with Wimbush, if they can run the ball, they're going to get into their rhythm, and it's going to make it easier to throw. So we'll see how they respond after the year they had last year at 4-8. Let's see how they respond to a home loss by a point.
He is Herbie, and again, his top four after week 2. Number 1, Alabama. Number 2, Oklahoma. Number 3, Clemson. And number 4, USC. We'll see if there's a shake-up there with Clemson and Louisville this weekend, and College Game Day will be there. Herbie, every week with us here on Mike and Mike. Thank you. See you next week, Herbie.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
Kirk Herbstreit every Wednesday right here on Mike and Mike. I'm really looking forward to that. If you remember that game last year, he mentioned 2 Louisville games last year that I remember. The Florida State game was unbelievable.
Yes, it was.
And I had picked Florida State to win the national title, so that went really badly for me there. And then that game against Clemson, which college football is so good that it's kind of hard to say it was the best game of the year, but it
was right there.
It was awful close.
Right there, without question.
So we'll see what he can do. And look, everybody knows there's only been one guy ever to win the Heisman twice in his life, but Jackson has a really good chance at that. Right now, do you know who the favorite is? Do you see? I got this sent to me yesterday. Do you know who?
I did. I can't believe I just. Who is it?
The favorite is Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield.
After that performance of the other night, and Lamar Jackson is second. We shall see. All right, a lot left to do here, including getting to the bottom of this winning streak. And Golick saw something that made him very, very angry, and he'll share why next.
Guys don't really talk about antiperspirant. Despite that, 91% of Dove Men Plus Care users recommend it. Here's what they said.
It blocks the, perspiration, I think is the fancy word.
It's comfortable. It smells nice. My girl likes the smell.
Well, I don't know. It's hard. I think it's quite masculine. My underarms aren't the worst thing at the gym.
It's kind of like the Hoover Dam from my armpits, I guess.
Dove Men Plus Care Antiperspirant. Tough on sweat, not on skin.
All right, so busy this morning, and a lot of things to get to, including, when I was in college, you were busy playing football.
Right.
And I was studying journalism, and one of the things that we did then, I don't know if they do it in journalism class schools anymore because things are so different. They probably do. Is you actually learn headline writing, which I have taken the stuff that I learned from that and tried to turn it into what we call teasing on the radio and now on television. But I've got a great one for you. Coming up off the top of the hour, I will tell you a story of a coach who married his player. A coach married his player.
Okay.
An active player. And no one has a problem with it.
Okay.
Details coming up off the top of the hour. That's a headline back in the day. You would have
kidding.
read the story.
Yes, you would have.
Now you would click on the story. You don't have to do either of those because I'm going to tell you the story. But there was something that you saw on television last night, Mike, and your reaction to this really fascinated me, how angry you got.
Well, I mean, with all the talk of the NFL and the Players Association, how they don't get along, and the looming CBA and after the 2020 season and what may happen there. Last night was the 30 for 30, the year of the scab. And it was the 87 strike when they had replacement players. Now, they focused a lot last night on the Washington Redskins, who didn't have any players cross the picket line of games that were played, and it culminated in them in the last replacement game, them playing the Cowboys, who at that point had 21 players crossing the picket line, and the Redskins still won the game with all replacement players over the Cowboys, who had the likes of Randy Whites and the Danny Whites and the Tony Dorsetts back in the lineup. But as I watched it again, it certainly brought back a lot of memories, how we basically telegraphed this strike, and it gave those, and again, they highlighted on Jack Kent Cook from the Washington Redskins and Tex Schramm from the Cowboys of how they were planning to get these replacement players, not stand still here, but be proactive in getting replacement players out there. So it really heavily skewed on those teams. But still, it brought back a lot of memories because I remember those. If you watch it, the signs they were wearing, the sandwich signs they were wearing, I was wearing one of those. I was marching. I was yelling and cursing and throwing stuff at the buses of replacement players that were going on. You saw in Kansas City there were players riding in the backseat of pickups with guns. It got ugly out there, and we didn't win that. We didn't even get close to winning that. They got replacement players, and they showed in the Washington game after the first replacement game, fans came out of that stadium saying, stay on strike. And then players, Randy White from the Cowboys, he breaks ranks almost immediately and is playing. You have guys, and then Tex Schramm held annuities over some of the players like Tony Dorsett, like basically a retirement fund that was in the contract, held it over Tony Dorsett. And Tony Dorsett was on camera then saying, listen, I love my teammates and all, but I'm not, that's $6 million. I'm not losing it. He goes in. You have, as I said, Randy White saying, that's $31,000 a game. Lawrence Taylor, that's $60,000 a game. I made $3,400 a game. That's what ticked me off. Is these big money guys, they've been getting big money checks. It wasn't their first time they were getting big checks. They were getting big checks. Most of us were making next to nothing comparatively, and we were out there striking, and they were crossing the line. And as soon as they did, it was over. We were done. So much to the point where we thought when we had our player reps call Gene Upshaw and say, we're all going back to work, the NFL, the owners gave us a deadline. I think it was by Monday or Wednesday. They gave us a deadline, and we missed that deadline. But we all figured we're back. They're going to let us play. They didn't. One more stab at us after already beating us. They said, no, you guys missed the deadline. You're locked out. We tried to go back to work, and we're locked out because we missed that deadline. So that was the fourth game of the replacement players, and then we went back, tails completely between our legs. I don't think it was set up great to begin with, but then to have your big money guys just break ranks and not give a damn about it. And that's why I even tweeted about it. That's why it's going to be tough for players. Because you have basically 1,700 players throwing 2,000 when you had practice players. You're asking them to have solidarity. You're asking them to miss paychecks as opposed to 32 billionaires who have deep pockets. And it's a very difficult task. And we were digging our heels in 87 about free agency. We even took free agency off the table during that strike. And the league they knew they had us then, so they could just completely play hardball with us. But what aggravated me the most was the fact that it wasn't the guy who was making $2,000 a game or $3,000 a game saying, my God, I got to go back. I mean, it's not a lot, but this is what I'm living on. To guys that were making $30,000, $60,000 saying, I can't miss that paycheck. So here goes Lawrence Taylor. Here goes Joe Montana. Here goes Randy White. Here goes Gastineau crossing the line. And we're all standing there with our sandwich boards on going, what the hell's going on? Yep. What are we doing out here? And it just completely fell apart.
I know it's hard to have that solidarity, but guess who did it? The baseball players did it. And look at their deal and look at the football players' deal. It's not that complicated. You know, Mike, you weren't here the day that Jeff Saturday was in our studio explaining a lot of this stuff and what actually happened in this collective bargaining negotiation. And why everything you just described is the reason the players have the deal they have right now. We can talk about that further as we go. But up next, it's a great headline. Coach marries his player. It's a true story. Details next.
Guys don't really talk about antiperspirant. Despite that, 91% of Dove Men Plus Care users recommend it. Here's what they said.
It blocks the, perspiration, I think is the fancy word.
It's comfortable. It smells nice. My girl likes the smell.
Well, it's hard. I think it's quite masculine. My underarms aren't the worst thing at the gym.
It's kind of like the Hoover Dam from my armpits, I guess.
Dove Men Plus Care antiperspirant. Tough on